what you're thinking. You see these two premium MPVs and you've just assumed it's a comparison, right?
Wrong. We aren't going to compare these two cars head to head. In fact, we can't, because while they're both premium MPVs, where the Innova's price ends is where the Carnival's price begins. So they belong in two entirely different segments.
And if you take the top spec versions of both, there's 10 lakh rupees between them. That's a whole lot of money. So what we are trying to really find out is how much more MPV do you get for the extra money?
And to do that, I'm going to be your friendly driver for the day.
And I'm going to be the big man at the back.
Before we go any further, do let us know which of these two MPVs you'd like in your parking and why.
And of course, do give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the Autocar India channel. We'll start the day's proceedings with the Innova Crysta. It's an MPV you are all familiar with, so treat this as a refresher course, if you will, of all that's made the Toyota the people's champion. Now, at the wheel of the Toyota Innova Crysta, it's quite easy to see why people love it so very much. Now, I'm sure there's a lot to love in the back seats as well, and Nikhil will tell you about that in a moment. But from here, it's this commanding SUV-like driving position that makes it so great from behind the wheel. You see, it shares a platform with its big brother, the Fortuner, and you can feel that while sitting here. You can also tell why the Innova has gotten so much more expensive over the years. You see, since the original Innova, it's climbed in price by over 10 lakh rupees. But this latest Crysta version in its top spec that we're driving today does have something to show for it. It's got quite a lot of wood trim on the dashboard. There's even some wood on the steering wheel. The steering is leather wrapped, and there's even this nice velvety place to put your elbow. That said, I wish there was some soft touch plastic here in the cabin. It's very good quality plastic, but it's all very hard, even on the dashboard. Things like the non-woven roof lining and the aftermarket look touchscreen don't help either. You also have to make some compromises now in terms of power. The old 2.8 diesel is gone for good. The BS6 spec 2.4 litre unit is the sole diesel engine on offer, but you can have it with a 6-speed auto now. The engine and gearbox work well together to deliver smooth and peppy performance low down, and it will cruise quite steadily on the highway, which is good for an MPV. But this is not the sportiest powertrain, and if you try to extend it a bit too much, it feels a bit utilitarian, and it sounds that way too. And speaking of utilitarian, this is an old school ladder frame chassis MPV, and it's got a hydraulic steering setup. While that does give you that solid, reassuring feel, it does have a downside in that the steering can be quite heavy at low speeds, and if you go over a bump, it does give you a lot of kickback through the wheel. A ladder frame chassis doesn't spell comfort either. The thing about this ladder frame chassis is that while it's really great at bearing heavy loads and gives you tremendous confidence to just barrel over the roughest of road surfaces, it does have a bearing on the ride. Though it absorbs bumps really well, you do feel a lot of them. And well, I can tell you that from the front seat, but Nikhil, what's it like in the back?
Yeah, so Gavin, you're right about that. It's, well, not the most sophisticated of experiences. I do feel like I'm moving side to side on low speed bumps, but it is still better than a whole lot of models. And really, at the back, the overall rear seat experience is rather nice. I like the seats. I'm a big guy. I like that the seats are large and supportive. And I also quite like this ambient lighting strip on the roof. It gives this Starship Enterprise sort of vibe. And there's actually also a lot of adjustability built into the Innova's cabin. Here we go. One lever push, and I have a lot of space. My seat moves back. I have a recline function. Sadly, the armrest angle can't be adjusted, so that's a bit of a downer. There is this picnic table. But yeah, fit in your drinks bottle, and I think you're happy here for a few hours.
Do note, entering the Innova's cabin requires a bit of a step up, and the high floor is a function of its ladder frame architecture. Getting onto the back seats of the Carnival also requires a substantial step up, and though they're parred, the sliding rear doors might seem too van-like to some. But let's zoom out for a second. Remember we said the Innova and Carnival belong to different segments? Just check the difference in size.
The Carnival is 400mm longer, 150mm wider, and is longer in its wheelbase by 300mm. And the size does matter. In the Kia Carnival, everything is a little bit more. And it starts with the very size of the thing. Just this center console is so much wider, I feel that the passenger seat is a lot further away from me. And though the view out the front and the sides is really good, you're always aware of how big this car is and how far back it stretches out behind you as well. There's much to say about the look and feel of things inside as well. Now, I'm personally not a huge fan of the way this dash is designed, but again, that's just me. It feels a little bit old school, but you cannot fault the quality. There's loads of soft touch material all over the place, and everything is very neatly and logically laid out, I'll give it that. And then there's the equipment list. Kia has made it a point to load its cars with loads of equipment. There's Apple CarPlay and Android Auto in the touchscreen, as well as UVO connected car tech. There's 3-zone climate control, and my favorite on a hot day, a cool driver's seat. There's no contest between the Kia and the Toyota in the features department. The Kia gets you all the goodies you'd want and then some. It also goes one up on the Innova with a feature we just love in India, the sunroof. The Kia's got not one but two of those. You also get more safety kit in the Carnival. So the Carnival is leagues ahead in goodies and gizmos, but what about the way it drives? Continuing with the things that there is more of in this car, there's the power. This 2.2-litre diesel engine makes 200 horsepower. It's made it to an 8-speed automatic gearbox, and driving it doesn't quite feel as peppy off the line as the Innova does. Well, this is a much bigger car after all, but once you get it into its stride, the performance really feels a whole lot stronger. Now, let's quickly talk of a few things that this car has less of. And one of those things is noise. This engine does feel significantly more refined than the one in the Toyota, whether at low revs or even high revs or even cruising out on the highway. Another thing that's less in this car is the amount of effort that's required to steer it. Now yes, this is a very large car, make no mistake, and getting used to its size does take a little while. But once you do that, you find that the steering itself is very light, and it makes short work of steering this big car, even in tight spaces, once you're used to the size of the car. Another thing that's less is the ground clearance. Now, it's not too bad, but it's still less than what you get in the Toyota Innova. It's not too much of a problem, except when you get to some really tall speed breakers like this one. And even then, it's not so much the ground clearance that's the issue, but the really long wheelbase of this car. And if you find a truly large speed breaker, you got to be a little bit careful, or else you'll scrape the belly. There's also that difference under the skin. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Innova uses a ladder frame chassis, and it also uses rear wheel drive. Now, both those things are better for load lugging because it makes moving heavy stuff a lot easier for the car. The Carnival, on the other hand, uses a more conventional car-like monocoque chassis and front-wheel drive. But from the driver's seat at least, it really doesn't seem to make too much of a difference. So overall, despite this being a much larger car, it does come across as the easier, quieter and friendlier one to drive. But let's face it, these cars are more about what's in the back. So Nikhil, tell me what it's like back there.
So now, continuing on the theme of more, there is so much to talk of. I'll start with the features, then I'll get into the finer details of the rear seat experience. Now, in the back, you get an air purifier. There's also my zone of climate control. Unfortunately, for the person seated here, it's on the far side. I've got a dedicated rear seat entertainment system. I can connect to the internet via my mobile phone, mirror what's on my phone. So a nice way to chill out after a long day at work. Then what I also really like are these massive windows. Aren't they as big as the ones that you see on trains? Makes for great viewing on a long journey.
The Carnival also gets you sunshades that makes a difference on a hot day. But there's more to the Carnival than just creature comforts.
Now the other point of difference on the Carnival is the ride quality. Now what you get here is a more genteel experience. It's softer, yes, it is more controlled. Even when you're going faster, it feels like the plusher car to be in.
You can't talk of the Carnival and gloss over the sheer space and those VIP rear seats.
Now I don't have the option to move the front passenger seat from the back as I do on the Innova, but really with so much real estate all around me, I don't think I'm really losing out. There's loads of adjustment, and in our times of social distancing, it also helps that I have the option to move the seat further away from my co-passenger. Now the seats, beautifully upholstered, really plush. They feel like they belong to an expensive car, and just the sheer amount of adjustment. So forward, backward, sideways, further back, backrest reclined, and leg rest. This is a place you'd be happy to spend long hours in.
That's that about the seats that'll be occupied the most.
And now it's time for the all-important third row.
Well, these are the smallest set of seats in the car, so obviously I'm the one who's going to be testing them, right?
Wrong.
It's the Innova that's put to the test first, and the single lever mechanism for middle row seat fold and the space it frees does make getting in really easy.
Nikhil and I work out a gentleman's compromise on room, but can he really be comfortable at the very back?
Yeah, I'm quite comfortable here actually. Now I wouldn't go by Toyota calling this third row a three-seater, and there won't be space for two more of me. But generally, it's fairly comfortable. My knees are up, but I think I can spend a reasonable amount of time in the back. I like that the backrest recline is quite generous, and the window is also quite nice and large. So a pretty nice place to be.
Of course, we had to answer one more nagging question.
So for all its extra size, could the Carnival really have that much more space than the Innova?
Only one way to find out. So now this Carnival with the VIP seats doesn't have the yogasan seats that flip and fold and stand up, but you do have to move them forward, sideways, recline the seats, or you could just use the passage between the second row seats. Okay. Yep, I'm in.
It's the same drill, finding a seating position that suits both Nikhil and I.
Nikhil, how are you doing back there?
I'm doing quite well. There's lots of knee room, and I think the width is enough for a third person to be relatively comfortable. But there are certain things that work against the Carnival. Now the roof at the back is definitely lower than the Innova, so I have to slouch down a bit, and what that means is my seating position isn't as comfy as it was in the Innova, and there's also slightly limited footroom, but in all it's a very habitable place.
And what of the area behind the last row of seats? Luggage space.
Now with all the people these cars have to carry, luggage is also important in case you want to head out of town, and the Innova has always been good at this. Check it out. Even with all three rows up, it can easily take one large suitcase and two smaller ones, or a mix and match of that sort of thing. For the Carnival, well, it can take even more, as you can imagine.
Now in the Carnival, you can fit 4 large suitcases. We've got 3 here and we ran out of luggage. But you can fit in 4, and the magic is that because the spare wheel is positioned up front under the B pillar, there's this deep cavity in which you can fit in a whole lot of stuff. And as an added plus, there's an extra amount of flexibility built into the last row of seats.
You can fold the Carnival split rear seats flat at the pull of a lever and free up even more room.
The Innova also lets you do so, but the whole execution is a bit rudimentary. It's still quite easy. Use the tags to pull the seat up, lift them sideways and clip them. You do lose some width in the bargain, and it's simply not quite as accommodating as a Carnival. If there's something we've established over the day, it's that the MPVs take slightly different routes to justify their higher price tags. The Innova is a bit more old school, winning you over with its tough underpinnings, workhorse of an engine, and above all else, Toyota's legendary reliability. It's an MPV that will prove an able companion on an adventurous trip into the hills.
The Carnival isn't quite as rugged and won't outlast you like the Innova probably can. But the big Kia sure as heck lures you for its premium experience. It's the roomier, plusher, quieter and better equipped option, and also happens to be the more powerful MPV. In some ways, the Kia is also the more practical MPV.
Like we said at the start, this isn't a straightforward comparison and we won't be picking a winner. But to address the question of how much more MPV the Carnival gets you for the extra money, the short answer is a whole lot more.